So we are back, but I'm looking for a motion to extend executive session for 10 minutes. And then a second.
Okay, we are back, and we will resume the meeting. The first item, or I should say, the next item on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Dr. Anderson, do we have someone who is ready to do the Pledge of
Yes,
Allegiance?
we do. The best parents as teachers team in the state is here with us. Can you two come and lead us with Pledge of Allegiance? Just come right on over here to the middle, and you can introduce yourself so everybody knows who you are. She didn't know she was going to do
I
that.
did not know. Sherry Bonus with Parents as Teachers.
If we can start us on. Oh, there we go.
Hi.
Regina Ingo with Parents
She's
as
giving you
Teachers.
that one.
Oh.
There you go. All right. And you can start us on off. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the
United States of America
and
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. At this time, before we go on to our next item on the agenda, we would like to take a moment of silence to honor and remember the Topeka Public Schools students and staff members who recently transitioned. Please join us in a moment of silent reflection. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, the next item on our agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Do we have a motion?
I move the board adopt the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Dr. Schumacher. Do we have a second? Mr. Munoz seconds. Any further discussion? All right, you've all heard the motion. We will move to a vote.
And the vote is open. Thank you. All votes are in. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Lister. All right, Dr. Anderson, we are teed up for school highlights.
Oh my goodness, this is my favorite part of the meeting. And today we're going to be talking about families, specifically parents as teachers. And so tonight we're going to be sharing and highlighting the Parents as Teachers program because they just earned the endorsement as a blue ribbon program for another 5 years. Now they received their first blue ribbon under Nicole Fairley. She is exceptional. She's brought team members with her. So she's here not only to receive that award, but to share with you and others listening what Parents as Teachers is. How do you use that? You've heard her before, but getting a blue ribbon is no small feat. It really does affirm that we are one of the top performing visiting affiliates in the Parent as Teachers National Network. So Mrs. Fairley and team, please come on up and let's congratulate her on earning that blue ribbon for the next 5 years. You are exceptional. Thank you so much for all that you do. We're going to end up taking a picture with the board. We're going to turn it over to Ms. Fairley to introduce her team and answer some questions. And if you can share what a blue ribbon is. Ms. Fairley, we have a certificate with your name on it, but how many PAT folks do you have? Thank you.
So including me and a secretary, there are 11 of us now.
So we will need 11 certificates
Mhm.
because it takes the team
It does.
to earn that certificate. Normally we do give one, and thank you for doing the one. Dr. Gray's back there smiling. I didn't tell him this before, but making sure that we get those 11 names on there. So we'll do that and we'll get that to you Friday. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you. Can you share how long you've been in the district, Alice?
Yes, I am Nicole Fairley, and I've been with the district. It'll be 15 years this May that I've been working with parents as teachers. And introducing with me, I have Sherry Bonus. She's now transitioned into a lead parent educator for us. And Regina Engel is our bilingual parent educator. And Regina has been with the district almost almost 20 years at this point. So it's been quite a long time. So thank you, both of them, for showing up here. So you guys have heard about Parents as Teachers before, and we're just so grateful that you support the Parents as Teachers program. We're a small program here, 9 parent educators at this time that serve families in our district up until the age of 5, most of our children being under the age of 3. But we work quite closely with families that are sometimes receiving tiny K services, or also in a preschool classroom, or any other number of things. We also provide, in addition to the home visits, we provide group connections. Our big one is coming up, which is our Roll and Read, that we really enjoy partnering with the United Way to host that for a lot of families to encourage literacy and health. So our program really is able to serve families in the community. So we're just down the hill at Quentin Heights. We're also at Pine Ridge. We are at Shaner. We have an educator there, and we now are in the Ross Elementary School, being able to share Parents as Teachers with families there. So really just working together and collaborating, really trying to support as many families as possible that have young children to really help them get ready for school. That's really our goal, is about school readiness. So again, just really want to thank you all for your support. The support of the district really makes a huge difference when it comes to Parents as Teachers programs. I also happen to work too as a trainer for the National Parents as Teachers organization. And so I am able to see lots of programs around the country and around the state. And I can tell you what, that having a really great backbone organization really makes the program function better. But your support really helps spread the awareness of how important early childhood is, and how important that support is for a lot of our families. So thank you very much.
Going to open this up to questions for the team. I love how you're videotaping her, but if you want me to videotape you, click on YouTube, because they're probably going to ask a question or two. So may I borrow your phone and videotape you? And both of you all. Yeah. We're going to come on up. We're going to turn this over to the board for any questions you may have.
Does anyone have any questions? Dr. Schumacher?
Can you educate us, and I don't remember if we've talked about this before, but just how we identify those families, or whether it's through like self-referral or some of the other avenues?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really great question. So we are very lucky that we have a program that goes into hospitals and talks to families as they are having their babies, and also sometimes at a couple of the locations that families may attend before as they're pregnant. And so we are receiving some families in pregnancy, and then some usually by the time they're on our wait list around 3 months of age. We also get a lot of self-referrals from families of just, my friend had the program, we really enjoyed it, as well as getting them directly from preschool services, be that special education service or just other preschool classrooms. So really just wherever families are, we seem to be getting them. Right now, we don't have necessarily a huge need in recruitment, just because we do have a wait list, and I've tended to always have a wait list. I think it's about 125 families right now. But we are always trying to recruit families, even if that is just to our group connections that families can attend, because sometimes we're able to talk to them there and find out something about them that says, we might need to get you connected to somebody else pretty quickly. And that happens quite a bit, actually.
Right. Anyone else? Mr. Munoz?
Congratulations on this. This is, well-deserved. As myself, as a regular member of the dads group who used to meet, I think I've been in there since my daughter was, I don't know, 10, 12 years. I wonder if you might talk about how many families that you serve, and then sort of the different ways that you go about to sort of serve them.
Yeah, so I think I looked at it a little bit and actually pulled that just in case, so I would have that in case you asked. I think when I looked at it earlier, it was this year, we've served about 234 families throughout the year. I think it's closer to 270 children for the year, I anticipate, because we're always continuously, we work 12 months. So we are serving families throughout the year. And so by the end of the year, I anticipate that being around 300 children. So it's not just the home visitation, and I say home visitation, really that model could be a virtual visit. It also could be a phone visit, which has become something that we've been using quite a bit, especially with families that are really hard to communicate with, but they're still getting that information. We also offer the group connections, which you've probably seen our flyers around for our playgroups, and really considering how we think differently about playgroups. If you were to come into it, one of the things you would notice is that they are very structured. and that there's a routine. We've been partnering together with lots of other organizations. I think the one particularly recently that I've noticed a lot that's been coming to groups is families coming from Tiny K services, that the staff members are bringing families there to really practice those school readiness skills. And so that's another, and then resources. One I think about today that an educator just told me about was originally she got a family a couple of days ago, and the first thing mom said is, "I'm concerned." And she said, "Okay, 2.5-year-old, I'm concerned." And she said, "Let's do a screening." She did a screening and the child flunked almost every area. And she said, "I'm really wondering how this happened because it looks like you've been going to well child checks." Well, she's gone to well child checks, but child screams the whole time. And so she immediately made a referral for that family to get connected to services, and also made one for a 3.5-year-old. Who again, we may not have caught until kindergarten, right? We've had several families like that services have been so that we can catch them again as early as possible. And so I think one of the unique things about parents as teachers is that we're not just thinking about individual children, but we're thinking about families, because we realize how much family function impacts the work that the things that are going on in the home.
Mrs. Bowley.
I'm just so excited that you're here. I was wondering what helped you, what did you have to do to get this blue ribbon?
A lot of paperwork. I like to think about it. I kind of thinking about it a little bit now that I've gone through sort of the KISA process of just a little less pure part of that, but just the going through of the small details of the things that you do. So there are, I think it's now 81 standards, and I think we met 78 out of the 81 standards
Nice.
on there to meet. The goal is just about 80%. And so we just go through those standards. And so basically we're just doing those things all the time that just really make up that quality program.
And then that gives you goals on those other standards as well as that you didn't
Yes. So
meet?
for instance, one of our goals was around one of the things that we had not been working on was they asked us to provide some sort of domestic violence education. So that was something that we as a staff made as a goal. And we are providing universal access education on that. And so the next time we go through, we will have met that standard. So again, little standards of things that maybe just we hadn't quite met yet, but we've already put into place things to meet them at the next time.
Oh, I'm so glad that you took the opportunity to go through this process, and just because it just shows me you want to have a stronger, even better process than you already have, that you care so much to take these steps. So thank you for doing that and making our program here just a star.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for all your hard work.
Thank you. And I stand up here, but really the team is the one that does all the work. They're the ones that go out to the homes. They're the ones that have the conversations, that share the resources. They're the ones that do the screenings, that make the referrals. When it comes down to it, they're the ones that know the why, and they do all they can to really make sure that families are successful. And I really think that they really are the ones that should be commended. I just support them in doing their jobs.
Well, we do thank them. We do thank them because that's so important for every student that's coming to us that's been through your program. Is just so obvious. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mrs. Stewart Campbell.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I love parents as teachers so much. When I first became a mother, I was in my mid-30s. Most of my friends had had children already, and my sister, and I needed parents as teachers. And I learned so much from you all. Even though I had all these people in my life who'd already had children, I looked forward to my visits. The parent educator was a Darla, somebody.
Darla Allen.
Oh, yes, Darla Allen. Yeah, she was wonderful. And I just learned so much. So I love to spread the word about parents as teachers. And now I'm looking at Miss Ingalls. So mainly I tell Spanish speaking families about parents as teachers. So now here's my question. When the caseload, how many of these, you said there's 234 families. I'm wondering two things. Of these families, how many are Spanish speaking?
That's a
And
good
then
question.
follow-up question is, if you have some kind of like a needs assessment, you talk about this waiting list, how do you determine, who gets bumped up on the waiting list?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question. So I will say this, let me clarify of those families that could mean families that have exited or enrolled within this year. So every educator's caseload kind of reflects kind of the things that we're doing. So we have things that are going on, regular group connections, Blockfest, we're going to be working together to have some postpartum support or infant loss support things going on. Sherry's been working a lot with conscious discipline, so it kind of varies based on what kind of things that they have else that they're supporting. And then Regina works with a lot of the bilingual families. We had another bilingual educator, but she no longer works with us. So when I looked, we had 30 Spanish speaking families, but some of those families do speak English. But Regina's caseload right now is primarily made up of only Spanish speaking families. And I will say that a lot of families too, because we have such high needs in our community, are in the families that we serve, that most of our families are getting visits twice a month rather than just once a month. So that does affect the weighting of the caseload. So yeah, when I looked earlier, we had 30 Spanish speaking families that were considered in our program. But Regina could probably tell you more about that. And we do, and as you mentioned earlier, about where we get referrals, we get direct referrals from Ms. Stewart Campbell all the time. Also, being in, it's the nice part about being in the Welcome Center is we get a lot of families that come in specifically there or for clothing that we have available. So sometimes families will just walk in off the street, and Regina especially is really good about saying, hey, I see you have a baby, let's talk. And so, yeah, we do a lot of recruitment that way. So as far as how we prioritize that, sometimes I'll get a call. We've been getting a lot of families from the Topeka Rescue Mission right now. And so I'll get a call from them or from DCF saying, hey, we have this family that's maybe at risk for services, or this family. I'll say about Regina especially, she will never let a Spanish speaking family have an interpreter if she doesn't have to. She'll be like, I will serve that family. But also we get those direct referrals. And so then I kind of have a conversation, okay, let me look at some of the risk factors that they might have, and let's figure out if there's somebody that immediately needs. I try to prioritize specifically our teens. We have a lot of teens that we serve, so I try to prioritize them or others with sort of high needs if they call. So, but sometimes, it just kind of depends on what space we have available.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's give them another applause. Thank you. And I will say, Ms. Farley was with us. She's certainly an example of our internal promotion. Our blue ribbon, our first blue ribbon is under Ms. Farley. So promoting her into that role has really been a game changer for us. Additionally, at that same time, that's when the Welcome Center started. That's when the clothing piece, all that in the last 6 or 7 years, I believe, has really allowed for us to serve more families and expand what we're doing. With serving families, we have online, now she's at choir rehearsal, this next person who's getting their award from Highland Park. So she is probably on her phone online. And as you all know, because you've heard Miss Elena Ross sing, she is certainly dedicated to choir rehearsal, which started at 6:30. Oh, there she is. Okay. You're at church or choir rehearsal, right?
Yes, I am.
And my apologies for missing your college fair today as our meetings went on. But let me first start with the award, and there may be questions for you. And I think Ms. Jardina might be on as well with us. You're going to see Ms. Ross again next month, because she'll be coming with Highland Park, who has athletic awards and coach of the year. So she'll be coming again. She's always the cheerleader in the crowd for them. Miss Elena Ross, you are congratulated for the outstanding service to Highland Park High School students and families as a college and career advocate, and for getting the national designation as ACT-ACAC School of Excellence. So the Apply Kansas Award for the state went to Highland Park. This is her second year at Highland Park, and she is doing some incredible things. So we congratulate you for making Highland Park a school of excellence for students who have applied to college, and the number that you've done across Kansas.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so honored. Thank you so much.
Can you share, Ms. Ross, what Apply Kansas is, and some of the things that you did that led to you getting this award? Then we're going to open this up to the board members just to give them a little education about what this is.
Sure. The Apply Kansas is a program that is sponsored through the Kansas Board of Regents. And it is a program that allows students in the month of October, with this year we did have November as well, 2 days in November, to allow students that they can apply free admission to any Kansas public university technical school or vocational school. And that is the purpose of Apply Kansas. It waives that fee, which is a blessing because admission fees are expensive, especially if you have students who are wanting to look at more than one university. So this is truly a blessing for our students to have taken advantage of this year. So that's what Apply Kansas does.
Thank you. And we're going to turn this on over to the board for any questions they may
Okay.
have for Ms. Ross.
Congratulations, Ms. Ross.
Thank you, sir.
You bet. You bet. Any of my fellow board members have questions or comments for Ms. Ross? Mrs. Bowley.
Congratulations, only one in the state of Kansas. That is incredible.
Thank you,
And
Ms. Bowley.
I know you're working so hard over there and changing lives. And I just wanted to tell you, thank you. I really don't have a question for you because obviously you're doing everything right. So I just wanted to thank you for changing lives. You're changing lives for students, and your guidance and your hands-on is just incredible. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Ms. Ross, can you
I'm
share
very-
the event today as well? Ms. Ross, my apologies that you just had an event today that goes right along with this.
I did. We today we had a career fair. I don't call it college and career because college is a career as well. So we have a very broad, very diverse career fair that includes colleges, technical colleges were there. Then we go to the South Gym, which is the other area, and we have employers, our local employers like the fire department. We had this year, surprised me, we had the fire department, Shawnee County Sheriff, and the Kansas Highway Patrol. So I was really impressed with that. Working on Topeka Public Police, I don't know where they were, but that today. But it's opened to our juniors and seniors. And let me pivot for the purpose of the juniors. The juniors are getting a peek at what the process will be next year. So they won't come in already anxious, but they'll see, to me, they'll feel some level of comfort because they've been exposed to this area. I got a lot of kudos from the kids today. This year we did something different through our principal, assistant principal, Leosha Jardina. I was able to connect with her dear friend, Dr. Lover Chancellor from Central Missouri State. And they today came to be a part of the fair, but they also did a multicultural panel discussion with all of our juniors and seniors. I tell you, it was phenomenal, just phenomenal. The questions that were coming from the students were questions that I was like, wow, I would have never thought of that. But like, do you have to have an ACT or SAT at your school? What is the GPA requirement? The questions were just really sound questions, which, really made me happy. And then from that, they were able to share what their multicultural program is, what all the programs that they offer at the University of Central Missouri State. And then they had their Greek presentation, which, they just really did it with their dances. And it was really good. It was really good. So we are now planning to take a bus to that campus on next month because it was just an overwhelming response from our kids. It's given me another thing that I want to change in the fair now. So it was really good, really good.
Thank you, Ms. Ross. And I see Ms. Jardina is on. Were you hoping to add anything? And thank you, Ms. Jardina, for making that connection with Central Missouri so that now they'll be visiting there and having that speaker as that added component. Do you want to add anything in regards to the amazing work Ms. Ross is doing as a career and college advocate?
I just want to say I really appreciate her at Highland Park. the pieces that she gives our students and the opportunities that they have are huge. And our kids were hype afterwards. We were at the principal meeting, but when we got back, I definitely heard about it. Connected with my friend afterwards, and she said, hey, if you guys have more kids, let's get a bus. And the kids are really excited. And it also made the other groups excited as well to say, hey, we have another way that we can do this. So I really appreciate Miss Ross and how she comes about and gets all these people in there to Highland Park to give our students various opportunities.
Thank you, Ms. Giordina. Thank you.
Dr. Bonebrake.
Ms. Ross, you're amazing. Did you descend from heaven?
No,
I'm
hi,
just
Dr.
wondering-
Bonebrake.
I'm just wondering, how can we get more people like you? How'd you get inspired into this, get started, know even
Well-
where to go?
Well, my profession, what I was credential trained in is human resources. And I was in human resources for 27 years. Started off entry level and then moved up to become an emotional intelligence trainer. And also I put on fairs and conferences on my job. And then I just, after I had children and saw the educational piece, I said, I want to be a part of that. And came into education, and I have loved every bit of it. Oh, Dr. Bonebrake, it's so special for you to ask me a question. Do you all know he was my pediatrician for my firstborn?
Of course.
We hear that everywhere we go.
Oh my gosh.
No
Oh my gosh.
surprise.
I love it. I love it. Yes.
Ms. Stewart Campbell.
Real quick, congratulations. And I just want to thank you for choosing Topeka Public Schools. Everything you're doing, you know, it is so important. And as a mom, okay, the child I was talking about who was with parents as teachers is now looking at colleges, and it's overwhelming. And I mean, it is. And so, and I'm overwhelmed. So I think about our students whose parents may not know English or may not have, you know, just the background that other parents have. So the work you're doing, guiding them and helping guide the parents also is just, it's remarkable, and it is so important. And thank you for choosing Topeka Public Schools. We are blessed.
Thank you. And I will say that it is very important to communicate with the parents. That is something that I've implemented ever since I came into this position, because like you're saying, a lot of parents are not knowledgeable in this. But the more that they understand that it's an opportunity for them to grow and develop with their child, as being a parent, having children that went through college, it is so important. And the knowledge sometimes can be overwhelming. So if we can make it as simple, but with clear and concise strategies, these parents are really coming on board. They want to know when the scholarships are due, what's going on, when's FAFSA night. And that's all about the great team we have at Highland Park that helps with the communication feed.
Let's give Ms. Ross another applause. Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you.
She is exceptional. And so she perhaps descended from heaven with the help of Dr. Bonebrake, who was her OBGYN. That's pretty neat. With that does conclude our highlights. I would be remiss. We've been talking so much about parents and how parents help children get into colleges and careers. And I am so fortunate that last week during spring break, my father was unable to visit me then, but he showed up this week. And so I'd be remiss if as we're talking about the importance of parents as teachers, that I wouldn't be acknowledging my own dad. So Reverend Larry Brown, thank you for being here at the board meeting and for spending today and this evening with me, Dad. It's good to see you here. Oh, you're going to give him a microphone after that principal's meeting. We don't need a microphone or any questions in this space. Were you hoping for a question, Mrs. Schmidt? Oh my, all right. All right, Dad, you up for a question, sir? Okay. All right, all right. I don't know that this is on the schedule for a highlight. I will share with you that my dad was a teacher at one time. He's a pastor, a retired pastor, and runs a food pantry in St. Louis, and then was an executive at MERS Goodwill. And that's was his last position. And he continues to run that pantry every week, but is a committed former educator. Now with that, I'll entertain a question. That's a little unexpected, but
Mrs. Schmidt.
I don't have a question. I just have a comment, really. And I can imagine that you have much love for your daughter and overwhelming pride in seeing the footsteps that she's following. Obviously, she has a heart to serve others, and it sounds like she comes by that naturally. That's what she saw her own parents do. So I am glad that you could be here with us, and I hope that you have been very proud watching what she does for Topeka Public Schools. We are lucky to have her.
Thank you very much. I am extremely proud. Number one, that she likes what she does and that she doesn't do it for anything other than the love of the job. And that's really, really neat. I am glad to be here. Thank you very much. And from what I can determine, she has a group of fine, fine people to work with. Thank you for that. I'd hate to come up here with my switch.
all right. On the note of his switch, this is a video recorded meeting. But truly, he has spoken about how magical it is. In
Dr.
public
Anderson,
schools.
I think
We're going to
Mrs. Bowley
conclude
had
the
a question
questions.
or comment.
Okay.
I was just
All
gonna
right.
say, she works for Dr. Pepper. That's the secret. She's
That's
on
true.
Dr. Pepper sugar all the time, and she works many hours, so.
Okay. She works for a tennis shoe company also.
We're actually going tennis shoe shopping for him tomorrow, actually, to get him some new tennis shoes. All right, having said that, that does conclude our highlights. If we could take a 2-minute break to have a photo with our Parents as Teachers team, and then we'll turn it back over to the board.
Is public communications. And there's no one who is addressing the board tonight. So that will take us on to the next item on our agenda, which is the items for consent. And at this point, I'm looking for a motion to accept the business by consent.
I move the board approve the items of business by consent as presented and authorize the board president or superintendent to sign the special project and purchasing contracts for and on behalf of the board.
Do we have a second for that motion? Mrs. Smith seconds. Any discussion on any of the items or on the motion itself?
Yeah, I was curious for item 8.2, the purchase of the National Fitness Court equipment. I'm excited about this. Do we know the estimated time that it would be completed?
For the fitness equipment, Ms. Walsh, do we know the time in which, oh, I'm sorry, fitness equipment, Mr. Minky, do we know the time in which it will be completed, sir? The purchase of that?
Purchase is gonna be completed if you say yes to item 8 point.
Right.
That's the purchase, which, yeah, but in terms of installation, that'll be a summer project. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you think it'd be ready for use by this next school year?
Oh, for sure.
Oh,
Yeah,
good.
absolutely.
Okay.
To decide where.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. All right, so the location is still TBD?
From that,
Okay.
Location to be determined, and it is so noted that Ms. Schmidt would like it to be Highland Park, so noted.
And also, it's open to any student, staff, community member who gets to utilize it?
Anybody that wants to exercise for 7 minutes.
Anybody like?
Anybody.
Okay.
We want anybody willing to exercise for at least 7 minutes to come out and play with us. Don't even have to be a
Okay.
student. Yeah, or parent.
All right.
Absolutely.
Right, sounds good. Thank you.
Any other discussion? All right. In that case, you've all heard the motion. We will move to a vote.
Dr. Bonebrake, by hand? Okay, yes. All votes are in and the motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. All right. So the next item on our agenda would be the superintendent's report.
We have the PowerPoint that we're bringing up now, just 1 or 2 slides. I want to share with you a little bit of process. Systems remain, programs come and go. They come and go with the money and the leader, and we are looking at how do we build in systems for success. Perfect timing that Mrs. Fairley spoke, because she talked about a system of not only what she does for that blue ribbon, but how we got there with changing some things that we do to get more parents into that space. So as we bring up the PowerPoint that really shows some items related to one of our strategic planning initiatives. You'll see if we kind of continue to go, I think the rest of the words will come on up. So 2.0 is the strategic planning initiative on highly qualified staff, teacher recruitment and retention. Under that, we have been looking and focusing on that. It goes right along with your board goals initially about looking at climate and culture, morale, retention, the shortage. And so under that recruitment and retention, there are 2 objectives that we are focusing on: recruitment and retention. That's 1, highly qualified staff. If you are listening and you look at the strategic plan, you're going to see objectives 2 under that 2.0. So with that, a few of those bullet points that you see that are things that we're currently doing includes reorganizing our HR department to address customer service and responsiveness. We invited USA Kansas in, and they shared some details about ways to improve that. So they are now our new partners with helping give training in that regard after doing a deep dive. With that, we are partnering with a data-driven organization. One of those individuals are here tonight, Mr. Brett Church. He's not only been a principal and a high school teacher, but he's been an assistant superintendent. He's been a superintendent. He currently runs a consulting firm that really focuses on school improvement practices. And with that, he is our partner who will be supporting us with recruitment and retention goals. He has a statewide recruitment and retention survey. I've invited him in through this partnership through 2027 because our strategic plan ends in 2026. And the state gives a survey 2 times a year. He'll talk about that survey, what it is. He'll talk about the data-driven approach and how that analysis and the method that's used. And it most importantly allows you to compare ourselves to other districts in the state, which is the piece that I really love. And so he'll be sharing a little bit about that. But he is now our new partner. That's the second thing that we're doing in that area. The other areas of recruitment and retention. So you're going to expect these to be in our strategic plan, because strategic plans should be living documents. We don't create them today and come back to them next year. We add to them over the course of the year. So the other items that we're adding includes identifying some best practices and exemplar districts, using EPIC, which is Dr. Church's organization, for our surveys. Our retreat, Human Resources has never had a retreat, but they'll be having their first retreat with his help in June, and ongoing training. The other piece, the last 3 bullets under recruitment and retention, includes some ongoing training systems, really focusing on culture. And that's part of what Dr. Church will focus on. It's part of what USA Kansas will be focusing on, and as well as KSB, who is a partner with both organizations already. And then the last two bullets in there talks about pre-boarding, which we don't do pre-boarding now. So when you hire someone, we don't have systems in place to say, hey, you've been hired, and then have a lot of activities for them, like getting their computer early, things like that before their first day. We will now change that as of this year. So pre-boarding will be something new that we introduce into Topeka Public Schools, and then onboarding. It's your first day. Here's your orientation. So we have both of those initiatives that will now be put in place. Here's the other piece. We provide a lot of onboarding for certified but not classified. So we know this says teacher recruitment and retention. What you will see in the strategic plan is that we also need to have classified, para, all kinds of staff recruitment and retention. So that goal will be stretched that everyone is a teacher. And that's the language you'll see in the strategic plan. Parents are teachers, but so are classified staff and custodians and bilingual staff. And all of our staff members are teachers. Therefore, we should be having training, pre-boarding and onboarding for all of them. That's the other change. And the last one is we are recommending and putting in place a compliance team member, a compliance administrator to work on compliance in general, not only for HR as Mr. Robbins prepares to retire, but also when we look at our student population and what our teachers are saying about our students overall in terms of training, compliance as it relates to discipline and special ed. We previously had a KESB member, Cindy Kelly. She was our attorney and spent one day a week at KSB, and she provided some of that compliance piece. Disaggregating data by race for discipline. She retired, and so we would like to have that compliance monitor look at compliance for students and staff and bridging that gap about how they connect, because that is what creates culture and opportunity. Those are new things that will be under the strategic plan in the immediate future in terms of that ongoing piece. But they will be talking about Dr. Church and Dr. Weissman will be speaking this evening, but they're going to be speaking a little bit more in detail about EPIC, so you know what that is, and the partnership. That's two of those bullets. The other piece, lessons from EPIC. Here's part of what we want to share. We're going to go to two slides, and I believe Mr. Munoz, which he may want to speak to that, and we're going to move off that slide. Collectively, we all are part of this. So Mr. Munoz went to the teacher and retention training. We'll move off that slide and go straight to that piece. EPIC is a report that's been sent to you. It's been shared with our staff. We're going to post a state report on our website so we can share some of that data. Is that okay? All right, so we're going to be posting that on our website because it's very much password protected in some ways, so we get to see that data. And so with that, we're going to just share two slides. Here's the thing, that last slide that mentioned collectively, we all make a difference in having a future of hope. So Mr. Munoz, we invited our union president, along with Ms. Sharp and Ms. Wallace and Dr. Kipp. They all went to the teacher retention, and I believe Ms. Boley went at one of the NSBA conferences. They all went to the teacher recruitment and retention summit that Dr. Church gives. Blown away, not only about the data that he is able to pull, the method that he uses, which any of our team members that went to that may choose to chime in at some point, but also a couple of reports that for us really played a part with our entire leadership team about embedding this in our system. So this will be part of the new system, looking at teacher retention from a data perspective, from a culture perspective, and being able to make changes in that regard. Having said that, one piece was about feeling connected and about the broader Topeka community. But we have a state report that we were going to pull up on engagement and preparation. And those 2 pages on that state report for us was our aha moment. We are competing with districts across the state, and the engagement rate across the state was, we thought, low for an entire state in terms of how many people are disengaged, like how many students have apathy, how many teachers are disengaged, how many are going to leave the profession. It's a really scary look, but that for us caused us this aha moment of we need some comparisons and benchmarks, but we need to all be doing something differently. And so as we pull that up and find that particular slide, if we can find that, and if we can't find it, don't worry about it. But if we can find it, there were 2 slides for us. It was engagement and retention rates, and he was able to produce an immediate report of here are the areas that are low, high, and medium. Here's what they think about the district office, the board, the teachers. That was powerful. But not only looking at all of those, he actually classified it by, these are the ones that are going to give you the biggest bang for your buck. So you can't do 100 things, but you can do these 10. And so this is that report. I'm going to just, and this is just statewide data. And so here were the things that we learned statewide. And that was on one of the slides that I had, but statewide, we learned that mental health is an issue, discipline is an issue. And you will look and see that where it says low, your district's attention, that was the first one to addressing mental health. It's low. And just about anything that asks about the district, it's low. This is across the state. The things that are moderate are things, some of the things that are moderate are things about the district, but it's either low or moderate. And then the items that were high were what they think about their school and their principal, almost consistently across the state. So people may love their school, they may love their principal, but in terms of the board, the district, all those things, those ranked for the most part low or moderate. That was an aha moment. But the three big things that jumped out to us were discipline, mental health, those were two, and people were disengaged because of communication and how they felt about culture. Sounds kind of familiar, right? So as we think about the work that we're doing and we tie it into the state, Dr. Church has shared, and this might not be in his PowerPoint, but I'm giving you the why behind the what of why he's here and why we want him as a partner. He's going to share with us what the entire state is doing. He's going to help us pick districts that look like us, where we can compare what we're doing compared to them. That happens through accreditation, through the KISA process, but they pick it based on size of district and who's an urban district. We want to be the best of the best of the best, all right? So not just compared to districts that are high poverty, but the best of the best, no matter where they are. So he's going to be able to do that in partnership with asking us, who do we want to be compared to? Right, I've said a lot there. Was there a second slide that you were going to show on disengagement on a graph, or have we kind of concluded this piece? Is I prepared to turn it over? Okay, we're going to turn it over to Dr. Church's presentation. The engagement rate, Ms. Wallace, as we do that, any comments you want to make about engagement rate? And then Dr. Kipp, if there's any comments you want to make about the methodology that just impressed you, so feel free to come on up and I'll give you my microphone if you come on up to this space at this time. Dr. Kipp, Ms. Wallace, any comment since you went to that summit?
I think we were all sitting at our table trying to guess what disengagement was across the state. And I think we were all really surprised by how high it is.
Was it a 30-something% or maybe?
No, it was
something. I give Bill
considerably
know
higher
that
than-
number when he speaks, when you shared that.
31,
Was it
46.
Oh, it was 46% of teachers that are disengaged across the state of Kansas. I mean, that's a lot. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Kipp because they went to the summit. And then Mr. Munoz, if there's anything you want to say, having sat in the summit, feel free to kind of chime in and we'll turn it over to Dr. Church. Oh, go right on ahead.
I just wanted to add real quick that some of his work, like Dr. Anderson mentioned, we were pretty blown away by. He partnered with an industrial organizational psychologist and has, I really have an affinity for their approach with statistics, and having previously taught statistics, the methodology that he used in his study is phenomenal. I'm talking alpha levels at 0.01. I mean, it doesn't make much sense to you, but it really is. You never see these kind of numbers and this robust of a study. I'm just blown away by the level of detail and methodology that he used in this study, and I can't wait to hear more.
Mr. Munoz, is there anything you wanted to add before Dr. Church prepares to present?
You know, I relying on my memory, but I think what I took away from it was thinking of our employees, and I think we do a great job of trying to work with our new employees, but thinking of those who have been with us for that 4 to 7 years, and how do we make sure that they get through that period so that they stay with us for a long time, that longevity. So that's one thing that I took away from that report. So I look forward to hearing more.
Right, and his report takes it down to the teacher that's 4 to 8 years. Who knew that they wanted something different from the teacher from the first to 3 years? And the approach that they want to be talked to, communicated with, treated are two totally different things. So you can't do it one and done for everybody. And so we all learned that from his presentation. So as we shared, he will be a partner. That does mean that we will be giving our survey in October. Thanks, Dr. Weisman, for the collaboration that led us to giving the survey on October when we have that staff development day. So when the state gives their report in 2025 and 2027, October is our new day. This upcoming October, where we don't have Dr. Church, we do need, and we still need to fit it in at the end of this year. No, we said we're going to do it 1, 3, and 5. We did not give our 360. Our voice from our students and our parents is still important, and we do need to give that survey that Dr. Kipp has given for 11 years. We need that data as well for accreditation. So we will give that survey, but we're going to skip this year. And for the purpose of accreditation, we're going to tell them that skip was intentional, and we're doing it every other year. So if we do it next year, we will be able to do that. And then the year after that, and then Dr. Church would be following our issuance of that 360. So it allows us to still give a 360, but not over survey them with Dr. Church's survey. Does that make sense? All right. So having said that, we'll be using his survey, and then he'll be doing the retreats, but he has a whole plan of what he'll be doing for us. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Church from here. Go right on ahead, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. Some very kind words mentioned, and I appreciate that. Hopefully I can live up to the introduction there. So if you want to go to the first slide. As mentioned, my background is in education, and I'm currently an associate professor at Emporia State University in school leadership. And this work really started as I was starting at Emporia State, and a little bit previous to that, as I was seeing some of the changes we were seeing in education with regards to teachers leaving the profession at a higher rate than we'd seen previously. But really what changed the work from being a survey that I might create and then hope for a couple bar graphs and pie graphs was meeting Dr. Luke Simmering. And Dr. Simmering, also a native Kansan like myself, lives in Newton. He is a doctor of organizational psychology, or an IO psychologist. And one of his first jobs was to work on the employee engagement survey for Walmart worldwide. And so when I first met with him, he said, I'm an industrial organizational psychologist. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. And on my other screen, I'm starting to type in very quickly into Google, industrial organizational psychologist, right? And so what I learned from that was that what he focuses on is the psychology of the workplace. So what is the psychology of work? How are you engaged at work? How do we keep people in their job? What does it take to do that? And combines that with his knowledge, as was mentioned, of high-level analytics to be able to really get statistical information that can help us. And so when you think about our partnership, when we created Epic, it really is kind of that education lens, which I bring, and then his lens from outside of education in a variety of places. As you can see there, he's worked with everything from Fortune 500 companies to family businesses. He continues to do that work along with what we do in Epic. So this is a time, I think, to be very proud of Kansas in the sense that in 2021, when we started the Kansas Teacher Retention Initiative, I first reached out to KSB, and immediately they were interested in some of what we were trying to do. We had some relationships already. I had met many of those people before, and some of the leaders there. And very quickly, they said, we should invite USA, the Administrators Association, and KNEA, and see if we can all talk about this as a strong partnership. And very quickly, it came together in 2021. And when I go out and I have the opportunity to go out outside of Kansas to other locations and to present on what we're doing, there are two things, and we'll talk about both tonight, that really blow people away. The first is they ask, how can you get these three associations to all come together to support this? All the way down to press releases being sent out that are from all three associations at one time. And I think the power of that is it gives every group of key stakeholders that you see there confidence in the data to be able to feel comfortable about how we move forward with this information. And everyone, naturally and historically in education, we've often had situations where it's kind of like dueling surveys, right? Somebody comes to the table and they say, well, we've talked to our folks and this is what we're hearing. And another group says, well, we've done our survey and this is what we're hearing. And so the first thing we hear is the ability for us to get folks together to do this work was very powerful. The second thing they talk about is our responses and the response rate that we get across the state. So you can see there in 2021, we had 50% of educators who took the survey. And that's the first time we'd ever done the survey, and we had 50% of educators across the state. We had 143 districts that qualified for what we call the standard report. So we're able to get funding from the partnership that you saw there in the initiative to help us do the statewide survey and to give any district that has above a 30% response rate some sort of information for them to use in their district. And then we also can see there the percentage of districts that had over a 50% response rate. Moving to 2023, you'll see that that number even went up further. And people can't believe the response rate that we get across the state. Some of you may know, if someone's doing a dissertation or a study and they send out a survey and they ask people to, oftentimes if they can get 20 or 25%, it's considered a great success. And so I think part of this is just a matter of the awareness. And also I think that's powerful is the size of the sample that it gives us. And Dr. Anderson was mentioning those drivers at the state level. The larger our sample, the more confident we can be in the analysis that we're doing to make sure that what we're seeing, we can depend on and we can feel confident in. And so to see that number of teachers take the survey. Now, I always like to give the qualifier that the number of teachers within a small range is a little squishy. And what I mean by that is we get the numbers from KSDE, we work with them to get the total number. But one, what you consider a teacher. So we have school psychologists or others that will take the survey as well. So that can be a little different. But the main difference is many of you know that some districts in Kansas are members of co-ops. And instead of having their own special ed department like you're able to have here in Topeka 501. Well, the host district of that co-op, all the employees show up under their numbers. So when we look at response rates, we're always taking that group out to try to get it to what districts are they in, and then going back to the total number. So I always like to, I never want to say this is exactly right. And these are teachers that participated in the survey. So what it means is I may have gone through the survey and gotten all the way to the last 4 or 5 questions and then got distracted and never come back. We still use the data because there's participation up to that point. So we have a very robust sample that we're able to use at the state level. And so that's where you see those drivers at the state level that Dr. Anderson was talking about previously. So our research model is the same in essence for educators and then what was mentioned previously, which are classified employees. We have a survey for them as well. Same model in terms of those first 2 pieces and the top piece there of intentions to stay. So when you think about the survey, it's built on Likert scales, so 5-point Likert scales. And we're looking at in the survey 2 things. The educator experience, right? What are educators telling us about their experience when they're out doing their job? But also we have to understand that that's a perception, right? It's the perception. Their experience is how they're feeling in that job. So I'll give you an example. We work with a district that we believe, and they believe, and I don't doubt, has the highest number of leave days in the state for their teachers. But when their data came back, it was actually listed as a low satisfaction item. And they're like, how can this be? We've got the most in the state. And I said, well, when's the last time you added a day? They said, oh, it's probably been 5 or 6 years. So even though the teachers, first of all, they may not know they've got more leave days than anyone else in the state. And number 2, we know that in transactional items like leave or salary or other things, we have what we call an escalating 0 point, which some of you may know. You make a certain amount of money, that becomes your baseline. And so you expect to make that much or more as you move forward. Leave days are the same. So even though they might have the most, if their perception of satisfaction is, that they do not have a lot of leave days, that can still come through. So it's perception data, but it's around satisfaction. So what's their experience? And we have 34 questions in that area that are really, in a lot of cases, specific to education. Questions about what's your class size, plan time, things that would be very specific to the experience of an educator. The second piece we look at in the survey is engagement questions. And engagement questions are based around 4 sub-questions. Am I growing? Am I heard? Am I motivated? And I may forget one right off the top of my head. I always forget one and I change whichever one it is. But the point is, engagement is the lead measure to retention. So a key takeaway we always share is if you get your employees engaged, if you can keep them, you're going to, right? It's the lead measure to retention. And I believe I heard we have a doctor on the board. Is that correct? 2 doctors on the board. Okay, 2 doctors. There we go. And so one of the first times I ever heard about lead measures and lag measures was the story about how when hospitals always wanted to make sure they didn't have secondary infections because nobody would want to go to the hospital to get better and get sick. So they would track and track and track. And sometimes it went up and sometimes it went down. But it wasn't until they started focusing on hand washing across the hospital and across the medical field that they started to see that number down, because it was the hand washing was the lead measure that could change the measure on the back end, the lag measure. So in our work, educator engagement or employee engagement is the lead measure to retention, which is the lag measure. So if we want to keep people, we want to focus on engagement. So what are we trying to impact in terms of outcomes? We're trying to impact the number of people who want to stay in your district, stay in the profession. But then we're also trying to impact those other outcomes, which are based on research. More engaged educators have a more positive learning environment for their students. Their improved student learning outcomes, so their students perform better in the Gallup research on their summative district assessments. And then lastly, a more positive contribution to the overall culture of where they work. It also can tie to they have fewer sick days. They're out from work less. Teachers that are engaged. So that's the model that we use for both the educator engagement or the engagement survey for educators and for classified. So when we talk about what I consider to be kind of the key and most high leverage component that we have in our work, it is around this idea of drivers of engagement and retention. So what we're doing is we're running an analysis where we look at all of those 34 items and we're running what Luke refers to as, it's a regression analysis, but he refers to it as a correlation on steroids, right? And the idea is that we can really isolate what are the things that are drivers, meaning they're really important to those educators that we see that are engaged, and also those educators that are saying to us that they're likely to leave the profession at some point. And what we can do is we can look at those and say, okay, these low satisfaction items, as we're at the state level that you saw, those 4 low satisfaction items that are drivers of both engagement and retention, what we know is if we can improve in those areas at a state level, we're going to have the most impact on they're the highest leverage things we can do to keep more educators, to help engagement, and to keep more educators in the profession. And so we can actually do that at a district level as well. And so the power at the state level it's great news because it reflects everyone, but it also reflects no one because districts are so different, right? And so one of the things we're able to do in what we call the Inform report, which Dr. Anderson was speaking to, the district level data, is we can look at your specific drivers and we can say, these are the low satisfaction drivers. These are the moderate satisfaction drivers. And these are the high satisfaction drivers. We want to invest in those low satisfaction drivers to have the greatest impact. So we always say if you have $1,000 to put somewhere, put it in one of those areas. But also those high satisfaction drivers are things that you want to continue because they're doing you a lot of good with your teachers. And so we're trying to keep those going while bringing up the areas that are low satisfaction drivers. And so when we think about this, as was mentioned, The p-value, so the lower the p-value, the stronger the relationship is 0.01. So that says at 99% confidence, we can say this isn't due to error. Okay? And so when we think about the drivers, that's one piece of this. The second piece, as Dr. Anderson referenced, is what we call an aggregate benchmark. So in our work, one of the things that's important to us is that we do not take any district's data and compare it to another single district, right? We've been down the road sometimes in education where we put a lot of information out, District A next to District B. But we also know that it's important for a district to choose some districts that are most like themselves. And so the district's able to choose from districts that participated in the survey between 3 and 7 districts that we then combine into an aggregate. So you don't see, those are the districts that are in that aggregate, but you don't see them side by side. And then you can see your district next to that aggregate benchmark on every single item that we look at in the survey. So it protects that one-to-one comparison, but still gives you insight that would be important to you because obviously Satanta and Wichita and Blue Valley and Topeka are all very different places. Okay. So I want to show you, this is an example of a district that we've been working with since 2021. And in our work, we're up to almost 50 districts. We're closing in on 20% of the districts in the state that are going further with that inform report. So we've seen almost that number double between 21 and 23 as more and more people learn about the work that we're doing. And so this is a district, it's actually, they always tell me, they don't mind me saying, this is the Piper School District in Kansas City, Kansas, okay? And so what you see here is when we looked at their specific data, these are the areas that were low engagement and retention, right? Drivers. So these are all drivers. These are the 6 that came up in their report. You can see the ones that are drivers of both engagement and retention. So they click both those boxes. There's 3 of those. Then there's 2 that are drivers of engagement and 1 that's a driver of retention. So when we give them this information in what Dr. Anderson was talking about in terms of your strategic plan and the work that you're doing at a district level, if you go to the next slide, what you'll see is a couple slides that show, okay, what did we strategically do in these areas? What did Piper strategically do in these areas to try to address these pieces? Okay. And that is looking at, for instance, the ability to secure a substitute. You can see there what they did for support for handling challenging student behaviors. In some cases, it's about a new focus, right? They're already spending money on district professional development, but now they're targeting that professional development in areas that they know are really key to the experience of the educator and therefore the outcomes of the students. Your class size, they didn't really have a consistent model starting in about how do we figure out what the right class size is. So they did that first and then tried to target those areas where they might have needed to add some teachers. And I won't read you all the rest of these, but you can see there, and then on the next slide, because I know you have this, kind of the quality and cost of health insurance benefits. That came through, and so when they started negotiations, one of the first things they did was they took those drivers, because again, you have the teachers association feeling confident in the data in the district and said, hey, when we think about compensation, salary and benefits, maybe we need to give a little more attention to benefits as we look this year, because we know that that's a driver of the experience for educators in our district. And then lastly, society's view of the teaching profession. It is by far the lowest of the 34 items in the state survey. In 21, it was 1/3 of a point lower than any other item on a 5-point scale. So it's harder to change. But what they did was they said, let's first do some outreach things in the community about the importance of educators and teachers. But they also did a few things like $100 enrollment credit for anybody, any employee that had a student in the district, right? So help them with that. And then lastly, as you see there, and this is something that we're trying really hard in education to get away from, but it's difficult, and that is they removed that cap on years of experience. So if you're a math teacher and you've got 20 years and you want to come to their district, in some districts it might be, well, we can only give you 12 years of experience or 14 on our salary schedule. They're saying we're going to remove that cap to try to show you that your experience matters. And so when you come here, you'll be at that level of experience on our salary schedule. So you can see how those are very targeted to those drivers, okay? And then the last piece is kind of the results of that. So when we look at our 2023 data, if you look to the right, what you see there is the increase of satisfaction from educators in those areas that they focused on. You'll notice that they're double digits in all cases, with the exception of the society's view of the teaching profession, and up 48% in the ability to secure a substitute. Now, this is something that the first time I heard it, I'm like, do I share this part? And I thought, yeah, I need to share it. So there was a HR person in Piper who wasn't, and we had this first conversation, was not able to be in the meeting. And I was talking to them later and I said, wow, ability to secure a substitute is up 48%, right? And that was actually a driver on the state level in 2021. It was a statewide piece. And the HR person said, you know, our fill rate's only up about 2%. And I thought, What that told me, and what I think we've learned from this, is it's about people feeling like people are listening to their experience, right? I think the hardest thing or one of the things we struggle with is understanding that sometimes it's the matter of feeling like we're being heard. And one of the things we know in the engagement questions, there's a question about my voice and opinion are valued. Statewide, it's the lowest of the 11 items. What we're doing with this work, besides hopefully using it strategically to build capacity, to help satisfaction of teachers, to keep more teachers in the profession, we're also saying we're listening to what you're telling us. We're using that data in a way that can make a difference, and we're letting you know the things we're doing to try to make your experience better. And in a lot of ways, just that aspect can improve at a certain level some of the results, simply because people feel like, I use it, sometimes people feel like they're yelling into a canyon and nobody can hear them, right? And so the goal is to make sure that voice is heard. Teachers take the survey, and then the district's able to come back and say, here's what we know that you told us, and here's what we know is really important based on our analysis, and then here's what we're going to do about it, and we're going to keep you up to date. And I think that's why that 23 to 27, that kind of plan we're talking about, that from the 2023 data, we do it again in 25 at statewide and again in 27, allows us to have that longitudinal data. And then lastly, this is just an example of all the ways that Piper told us they use the data from that informant. Helps involve budget planning, negotiations, highlighting positive things in terms of staff recognition, which I know you did tonight. Also recruitment fairs, convocation, a variety of ways. And so our plan now is to start with the partnership that we've talked about to get us through the summer, which will give us a chance then to come back with a longer term plan based on what we've heard. So the first thing we're going to do is we have that longitudinal data to create the profile. So we can go into the 2021 data, look at the drivers. Take the 2023 data, look at the drivers. What's still a driver? What's not a driver? Let's look at that longitudinal data. Let's identify how we can use that. Let's create the benchmark group from 23 so we can look at that comparison to that benchmark group. Then we're going to conduct some focus groups so that we can better understand. So just like we were talking about that district that has those leave days, we can say, tell us how you feel about the leave days. What makes you say that? Well, we haven't had a leave day increase in 5 or 6 years. Well, do you know that you have as many, if I was to tell you you have more leave days than anybody in the state, well, we get more of the depth of things through those focus groups, and we can do that. And then having that half-day strategic planning piece and the tie with the HR department, as I know there's a lot of work going on with USA and with KSB in that area. And the powerful part of that is, as you know, we're already partners with them in the statewide survey. So we have a lot of collaboration. We have conversations. Dr. Wiesman and I have been out and done summits and workshops together across the state. I did a summit today in Emporia. It's the 5th of 7 that we're doing. I'll do 2 more next week. And so you can see there and do that piece, and then develop how we communicate the information out to everyone in the district for the board to be able, and also we can push that out. So like we said, educators understand what's happened. And then let's put a proposal together now more long-term by using that data to kind of inform our next steps. Okay?
So that, you can see why I asked him to be a partner long-term. So that is the plan moving forward. And this is who Mrs. Williams will be working with, so that when that retreat ends in June, that plan, when you asked her, how are you going to streamline? Well, she's going to be working with him using this data. So she can give you some strategies, but it really needs to be data driven. So the rest of it'll come from June, and he's going to help her write that along with USA Kansas. Now, when they take the survey in October, when will we have those results?
So the survey, I think in survey,
2025.
yeah, 25. So this year, 2023, we were able to get the results to folks it goes basically from middle of October to the statewide to about Thanksgiving break. We take that, we do the state report, and then district informed reports were to them basically mid-January. So it's a pretty quick turnaround as we run that analysis. But we have the data for you from 21 and 23, which we can run that analysis now, and we'll be able to get that to you in the next few weeks to be able to get the drivers to the district for 21 and 23.
So Ms. Williams will be coming back, and I think it's important that we share that data-driven piece because it closes in November. We have that report a month later, and we're able to use that. So since we have the old data, or the current data, he'll be using that. And Ms. Williams, along with Dr. Church, along with, I see Ms. Angela Dix in the background, who's partnering as teaching and learning to help train people. They'll be here again, sharing, here's what they learned, and here's part of what this means for them. Now, again, the full report after June, that full plan will be shared. So that's our next step. Are there questions for Dr. Church? We're excited and pumped about this next opportunity. And we hope that the board supports kind of what we're thinking of doing as a next step.
Yeah, Dr. Church, thank you for being here. And this has been fascinating. Can't wait to start to roll through this and see what we can utilize for engagement and satisfaction and retention across the district. Yeah. Dr. Schumacher.
It seems like the data from the state level and probably from some of the districts, it relies on response rate. And so is our data from 21 and 23, do you feel like our response rate is adequate enough for an informed report?
Yes. So, and one of the things I'll mention is like Luke is usually the person who will look at that. And so we set the percentage because it's a good standard, but it also depends on the size of the sample. So in a larger district, you could probably do it for less than 30% because of the number. But in this case, you'll be above that 30% number. And in one of the surveys you had, I believe 60%, and then another one you had about 34%. But because the number is plenty strong enough and large enough to be able to run the analysis, we'll do that. And also Luke will be, I kind of make it sound like Luke's off running numbers, but like the focus groups and probably some of like the retreat and some probably even presentations and other pieces, he'll be involved as well because he'll facilitate those focus groups because that's his background and understanding, where I kind of do different parts and he does parts. And so he'll be involved in this as well. And anytime there are questions, and we've already done this from anyone on the team, a lot of times they'll send it, Luke will be copied on it, and he can answer questions to make sure that we're on the right track.
Yeah, Dr. Church looked up our data, and when you took out the principals and all the other people and just looked at teachers, you had a little bit, you had a number that gave us the 30-something%. So first we said, man, this is our number. We were looking at all of our certified teachers, but he took it down to here teachers, not just certified staff. And I see your best friend, Mr. Ritter, just popped on in. He said, the other claim is, that's all right. Yeah. He said, my very best friend in the world is Mr. Ritter. Did you come to be his amen crowd? I did. All right. Nothing like an amen crowd in the background.
I met Mr. Ritter in college and we've been best friends ever since. And so I will not say anything publicly about that other than he's been a good friend for a long time.
Yeah, and he's one of our top teachers. Great to have you here.
All right. Anyone else? Mrs. Schmidt.
Hi, Dr. Church.
How are you?
Good. In complete transparency, Dr. Church and I have spoke historically when we, as a board, as everybody knows, I was one of the people pushing, really wanting to have a survey so that we could be data driven. And a little bird said, Dr. Church is saying, why are you doing that? We're already doing this survey. And so we had a great conversation. So I've just got to say, number one, I'm really fangirling that we get to partner with you guys to do this, to become an even better district. My question to you is what can we do as a board to help support this? Is there anything that we should be doing, or do we just need to sit back and let our leadership and you guys work your magic?
I think that, the first step, just like we're talking about with educators, is we know that the board will be engaged in the work and be hearing information as it's shared with you through a variety of ways. And I think in terms of like the day-to-day, if it comes up, it's just that idea of that consistent message that our goal here is to better understand the experience of educators. And yes, we want to understand the experience of educators in Topeka 501, but we also understand the importance of understanding the experience of educators in Kansas and across the country as a whole. Because I think, we often talk about, nobody wants to see a teacher move from, their district to another district. But it's a lot better for that to happen than for them to leave the profession, because then we're losing another person out of the pool to be able to serve students in their community. And so while we don't want to see that necessarily from a district standpoint, it's a lot better than leaving the profession altogether. And so I think it's, again, that kind of shared effort to make sure that teachers are understanding that we're trying to better understand your experience and try to use some of the tools, which honestly, what I learned in going outside of Kansas and doing some presentations, in the corporate HR world, this is the type of data that's been being used for about a decade. And so in some ways, we're trying to play catch up to in some cases, probably folks that are hiring teachers away are already using this type of data. And so we're trying to help, bridge that gap.
If I may, Ms. Schmidt, and my request is to support this partnership and to allow us to have this as our permanent partner for how we're going to be surveying our staff. Along with doing our 360, and that we also participate in the statewide survey and we embed that into the strategic plan. That is our desire, and it's what's the plan unless we hear otherwise.
Outstanding. Yeah, as you know, I'm a big proponent of being data-driven. Our money, our time, our people, those are all limited resources. So we want to make sure that we're focusing where we put our attention, where we can get the biggest bang for our buck. So
thank you.
Excited you're here.
All right, Dr. Church.
I think there's a couple more comments. I know Dr. Schumacher had something else.
Just real quick, you had mentioned classified staff. And how does that roll into the survey, like from 21, 23, and then going forward?
So now that we're partnering with the district, there are 2 windows each year that we give where the district, and since it's just those informed districts, it's not as much a statewide piece. We let all those districts know, like we will with your district. Here's the window that's coming up. Most districts choose either the spring or the fall to do. Then the data comes back and we have, for instance, drivers on the classified survey as well. There aren't as many items, but it follows that same research model for classified also.
Okay. Mr. Munoz? No, okay. Thought I saw another hand down here. Maybe not. Well, Dr. Church, I have to say that being a statistics fan, when Dr. Kip talked about your work having an alpha of 0.01, you had me right there. I was hooked right there. So definitely looking forward to seeing how this unfolds, and thank you for being here.
Well, getting Dr. Kip and you and Luke in a room all at one time might be dangerous with the things that you talk. I might be at the table and not understand a single word that's being said, but I probably nod a lot. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Dr. Church, our team has complete confidence in you and Luke, and we look forward to the next conversation.
Thank you.
With that, as we transition into continuing to talk about retention and climate and culture, Dr. Weisman, we're going to pull up her slides. Dr. Weisman is here to share about KSB's work and her climate and culture survey. Dr. Weisman.
Dr. Church is slipping out the door, you didn't tell any of those geek out stories when Luke and you and I were out, and all of a sudden we'd get an idea, pull over a whiteboard, and we'd have Luke drawing diagrams on a whiteboard because we'd get a great idea on how to analyze the data. So it's nice to know there's more company in our geekiness. I thought we were alone. So those of you that I worked with, as we've done this, have heard me reference the engagement and retention report as we've gone through this, because there is some overlap in the kind of work we did here. And so Brett and I were texting each other, I think, when I met with Dr. Shoemaker and Mr. Tatum on this final report. So I asked if I could just put the PDF up instead of PowerPoint slides, because I thought if you want to go back and forth in the report, it might be easier if we're kind of doing a scroll as opposed to having to go backwards on slides. So if you want to just go to the executive summary, first of all, right there. And can you all see that adequately?
Can you make it a little bit larger there? Perfect.
Okay. So the points I want to emphasize as we get started in this is it is a snapshot in time. You know, this is a moment in time influenced by context. And Brett said a number of things that will make it unnecessary for me to say some things that I wanted to mention, but I think the context in which the survey is done must not be forgotten. And Donna did a little research going back on the calendar and looking at the week in which this was administered. And so when we look at nationally, regionally, and locally, there were some significant events which are important to recognize as we look at the context in which people answered these questions. Echoing again what Brett said, what came through pretty clearly as we looked at survey results on both of these is that the importance of having the opportunity to express their voice and feel like voices are being heard came through strongly. So as we put the whole, and I'm going to use the word gestalt of all of this data together, an underlying piece ends up being student behavior. And it's reflected not purely, and this is some of the difference of when you do a purely quantitative study versus a qualitative study, and you have both of the parts. It doesn't always come out quantitatively, but then when you look at the context of comments from some of the qualitative data, you see how much it underrides that. It's also echoed strongly in the statewide engagement and retention report. So once again, it adds a little bit of reliability as you look at what your teachers had to say, your employees, and how that's mirrored in state results as well. The other pieces that came through strongly were the needs to focus on student and staff mental and physical well-being, influenced again by student behavior, employee supervisor relationships and culture. And I feel like being the last person here, I'm echoing recognitions that I heard tonight, reports that I've heard tonight, and Brett's report. And then a continued focus on the alignment between decision-making and the identified goals in the strategic plan, as Dr. Anderson has referenced a number of times before. Also, again, being a broken record, is going to be the importance of prioritizing the recommendations, because there are more recommendations than can be done in a short amount of time. And so the context from other data sources, including the engagement and retention reports, the 360 survey sources, and other kinds of data that the district collects routinely, can help drive how that information is prioritized. And so those data sources need to come from the administration to the board to help make some of those decisions on prioritizing. And just a final recommendation, and this was referenced earlier, to not have survey fatigue, would be to continue a scaled back version of this. So we would have some baseline data from this, but not a total replicate of this study in an every other year cycle opposite the engagement and retention report, because it will help provide some continuing trend data on the in-between years on that. And so I think one of the things when I get to the recommendations here that I want to emphasize is the discussion of the compliance monitor fits in strongly with something we have. And so much of tonight's agenda fed what I'm going to talk to you about.
And it's good to know we didn't talk before.
Yeah, no, this is without,
for me to learn.
without knowing this, that we ended up here. So if you go to context, I won't redo this, but I added the context of prior data that had already been collected from the district. So Cross and Joftis, I have their 2008, 16, 19, and 22 reports. So when you can go back and read this more carefully, you'll see the strands and the flow from those reports. And then I also included, after that, I included what Brett just talked to you about in the engagement and retention study as well. If you go back to under the 22 data from Cross and Joftis on page 7, what emerged with new language in their results, they're not necessarily new conceptually, was the need for trauma-informed instruction as a response to the primary concern of trauma among students. That came through strongly in our data here as well. And then the areas of continuing concern of sustainability, data collection, and ongoing training continue then to also flow through. So I think what I tried to do is tie together or package how these data sources can be used together to make decisions related to goal setting and prioritizing that goal setting. So then if we want to skip what Dr. Church talked about, and go to the bottom of page 8 under administration and response, I just really want to emphasize and can't emphasize more strongly enough how much maintaining confidentiality and anonymity of individual responses drove the structure, the administration, and the reporting out of data on this, and continues to, and anecdotally continue to hear comments that emphasize the importance of maintaining that confidentiality. And I think when we go back to what is a strong underlying need that's been expressed through multiple data sources of having the opportunity to have their voice heard, that's a critical fact that to have to hear authentic voices, to really know what people are believing and feeling, is we must maintain that confidentiality and sense of it. Not only must it be real, people must perceive and feel that data is safe. And I'm not going to go through things that I've shared with you prior. So this is just some of the information on the administration of the survey. On page 11, this is some of the demographic information on pages 11, 12, and the top of 13. Then the themes begin on page 13. The first one, as I've presented these to you before, is emotional safety. So this is data you've seen before. And then at the top of page 14, then there was an optional question following, do you feel emotionally safe?
If not, why? So these are comments that come from that. And the most frequently used phrases in those comments, I've listed the top most frequently mentioned phrases from the comments that followed that to give you kind of a sense of the theme of that emotional safety question. Other questions related to that theme are, do you have colleagues that you can trust with a work-related issue? Are you comfortable discussing a personal issue that may impact your job performance with your supervisor? And these are percentages. Do you usually feel supported by your supervisor? And is your supervisor aware and responsive to your changing needs and stress? And you can see that those percentages are relatively high, 87% down to 69%. When we get into the comments that follow those questions, the top 5 themes that emerged from that was the importance of needing awareness and understanding from the supervisor, understanding their stress and changing needs, a need for clear communication and guidance on personal leave policies, which I want to come back to that because that emerged in some interesting ways, which also shows up a little bit in the work that Brett just talked about. Then the need for supportive leadership, and then the need to be empowered as opposed to micromanage. And then once again, I want to come back to this personal days and the guilt issues because that did emerge differently than I thought it would as we originally wrote the question and asked the question. Okay, so then do you believe that your building principal is able to adequately support the mental health needs of staff? And so these, and then as a staff member, do you feel pressured to demonstrate student academic knowledge? These were trying to get at some of the underlying sources of stress that employees may feel. And as you recall from when I've talked to you before, the research premise in which all of this was structured as we look at emotional safety is on feelings of connectedness and safety. And that's both physical and emotional safety. And so this question, do you feel connected to the broader Topeka community? And just as a way to kind of illustrate what that connection might be is we asked an optional question, what are community resources you would access, just to see what kinds of community connection would be reflected. So this was just to illustrate that these were some of the community resources that were represented, or this is the complete list of community resources that were represented. So with duplicates eliminated. Okay, then once again on connection, do you feel connected to the parents of your students? And then district and building level morale. So these are charts that you've seen before. Okay, so those all fall under that theme of emotional well-being. And then for physical safety, so do you feel physically safe? And then to the question of if not, why? And once again, I indicated here, as I did in some other questions, that even though the question was if not, why, as an optional question, 27 people volunteered to say they felt safe. So I put that data piece in there because I think that maybe indicates the strength of which they felt safe. But 53% of the comments related for people who answered, if not why, 53% of the why was related to student behavior, 22% to inadequate security. And these were some of the categories in which those comments fell. Once again, the context of time and what was happening in the week before the survey was administered is important to think through as you read these, that those are a lens that influences this. So that's why having multiple data sources is important. So when we look at staff needs as another theme, so under efficacy and autonomy as a measure of if people feel like they have the tools and the skills and the knowledge to do their job well, they're more likely to be more highly engaged. And so what I thought was a significantly powerful number was that 82% believe that their role in the district, and realize this is all employee groups, okay? So all classified and licensed employee groups and administrators, 82% believe that they make a positive difference. So I think that is a powerful number that can kind of get lost, you know, in all the numbers here. And then the next questions go to autonomy. So effective decision making. Do you have the autonomy to do your job effectively and efficiently? And so those numbers were very similar. So that was interesting how closely together, because sometimes efficiency and effectiveness can be quite different. Okay, this is the question that I wanted to come back to, because originally this question was written into the survey as a measure of satisfaction. And that's how it's reflected in the teacher engagement and retention study. However, and this is why a qualitative piece can change the way we look at some of the quantitative pieces, the comments definitely gave a context that the use of personal days was not necessarily related to a sense of satisfaction or lack of satisfaction. From comments, it became clear part of it was an issue of communication and understanding of whether those were days that employees were expected to use. There were comments related to some employees who felt guilty using those days. There were comments related to the need to use those days for mental health well-being. And so part of why I moved this into this employee needs is it seemed to be driven more by needs. And when we talk about recommendations, this would be a strong communication recommendation, as well as other data needed, is at the point in which personal days were negotiated into the negotiated agreement. And I don't know the answer to this question. I'm throwing this out as a need for data. Was the expectation that most employees would take all personal days they were allocated? And if so, was that in the budget? Because that's a very different kind of issue than back in the olden days when we would negotiate sick leave, for example. You know, we had a rough percentage that we were able to use with relative reliability in terms of how many sick days each employee was likely to use. And so budgets were built around that in terms of sub cost and what it actually costs for people to use those days. What was and what is currently the expectation for the use of personal days? And is that consistently communicated across all employee groups and attendance centers? Because it does come through strongly in terms of comments in places where people express strong sense of guilt if they use them. And in other comments that it's an expectation that they're there to be used. And so more data needs to be collected, which it would not be hard data to collect, but it does the budget reflect an expectation that those are all used? If so, or if not, in either case, there needs to be increased communication across employee groups in terms of how that is used. Then in terms of, are your personal needs respected by your peers and your personal needs in life by your supervisor? And so some of this can get into issues related to some unconscious bias, perhaps on the part of some employees, but just the sense of what people perceive to be the perspectives of the people with whom they work and to whom they report. So the comments, the most frequently mentioned needs here were support from colleagues and supervisors, time management skills to balance professional and personal life, the need for a supportive environment and support for managing workload responsibilities, and then relationship building needs. Once again, from a training perspective, this idea of what expectations are. So some comments indicate, and some employee groups more strongly, that if a text message or email or phone call is received outside of the working day, that there's an expectation that they are to respond immediately. And in some other cases, that expectation did not seem to emerge. It came through a little bit more strongly on the part of classified employees. So once again, that could be an education communication issue. If I'm a busy principal and I'm sending out information, and I truly am speaking about myself right now and what I've done in my past, it might be 2 a.m. when I'm sending out blah, 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 blah. That does not mean I expect somebody to have it on my desk by 7 a.m. That's the time I had to send out the information. And so some of that may just be a need for clear expectations about when work is done and how to make clear what the expectation is. And so in terms of the respect that I mentioned, the feelings of guilt that I already talked about, and just probably some ongoing awareness kinds of training and education. And what do you need that you don't currently have to effectively do the functions of your job? And number one was time. And I remember the first time I was involved with kind of a similar survey way back in the last millennium. And time always comes out as the number one thing, the thing that we can't buy, create. You know, I've been told Beyonce has the same number of minutes in a day as I do, but she somehow produces so much more than I do. But it is how to be more effective in our use of time and more realistic about what our expectations are of what we do for time. but I'm not sure I've ever seen a similar question asked in which time doesn't emerge as a dominant theme. Support and resources, conversation about smaller class sizes, as you'll see when I talk about more data needed, costs associated with such things, with finite resources. And behavior comes through. Once again, following the theme of the night in terms of every agenda item fit. What we're talking about here was kind of that parent engagement piece. And then looking at the work that's being done at Highland Park, all of those things kind of feed these themes in terms of support of them. Moving on to high needs students, the categories of comments again are resources, mental health, behavior, and these were not discrete categories. There was overlap. Behavior would show up under emotional support, but it would also show up under consistency and discipline, that it was an underlying piece throughout most of these categories. Do you feel supported to do what you need to do? So I'm on page 24 now, and then the questions asked both as an individual, as a team. So we see very similar responses in that. They're not dramatically different. Again, on page 25, then under the categories of comments, time emerges again at the top of the list. And if you look at number 5, so it didn't show up with a frequency that could be brought forward in a quantitative way, but there were many comments that talked about the needs, how to address the needs of students with a trauma history and ongoing trauma, both in students and in staff and community. And so then from the teams, the category of needs here, and once again, you see behavior coming through. The basic needs of students, that is asked in part to get a sense of efficacy again, that are things being done at home, or does it all feel like it's being left to school to take care of? And so you can see that number's a little bit low, and that would also align with this ongoing need to look at parent engagement pieces and parent support. Okay, so then moving into the part that really moves us into the recommendations is the following the mission and meeting the needs of students, putting students first. So disruptive behavior and student well-being come through. Then some specific things were mentioned. Now, this question was asked in a way, what would you do? So these are individual people sharing their perception of what would make a difference, with the luxury of not having to calculate costs and other kinds of parameters. But this is where we can start. And then the administrative team then collects data to see, which of these things are feasible financially and legally and within all sorts of parameters that we have to work. This piece, I think, is important in terms of making sure voices are heard, that we hear. If we go way back to the work of Deming and quality circles, some of the most impressive changes that have been made that have changed organizations, now I'm going to sound like Luke Simmering again, come from giving employees voice to share ideas. Brett used the example in hospitals of hand washing. Well, I think you could illustrate the similar point with the advent of protocols based on lists. I mean, when was the last time you went in for a medical procedure and not had to repeat your name and date of birth 13 times before it's done? But that, once again, it's the development of starting with listening to employee voices and identifying then and then collecting data and being able to make changes based on that. So then we're once again on advancing the mission. Do you know the strategic plan goals? So this is good information for communications. And who's on your board. I will say your numbers are higher than some districts that I work with. And if you've attended or watched a board meeting, these are things that you have seen before. So I'm flipping through them pretty quickly. Okay, so this is like the culminating question that goes along with that last one. And these are the categories. So 10 categories of change that are recommended. And this comes from that question and a synthesis of 5,127 comments. These are the categories in which those came. And then some of the very specific recommendations are things that I heard tonight on the agenda, things already in play, work being done. For measures of satisfaction, then, would you recommend employment to a friend, to your own child? And do you look forward to coming to work most days? And these are the kinds of organizational psychology questions. Okay, actionable results on page 33. And I'm going to, first of all, the first bullet is, I think, the importance of leadership team development, which means at KSB, we call it the Great Eight. 7 board members and the superintendent create the Great Eight, or your leadership team. And so development of that team, working together with the board authority and then administrative authority, and the recommendations of the how with the why to address the what with the why that comes from the board. So strong recommendations there. Then some specific physical security issues. Those are the kinds of things that are technical, some of the easiest changes to make. They're not transformative, they're technical, and you get to check it off when you're all done. Okay, but that fourth bullet, if you would read that for a minute while I get a drink of water. So you represent your leadership team is part of you as the 8. I'll repeat that in my. So clarification of the Great 8, 7 board members, and then I say the superintendent. The superintendent and her team is that 8th part, or that 8th spoke of the Great 8. So in some very small districts, the team is the superintendent and a couple of principals. In Kansas City, Kansas, it's a much larger group of people, so that varies when we talk about it, but we call that the 8th part of that leadership team. Okay, that fourth bullet I asked you to read is really what I think is the big piece of this, because so much related to student behavior, both from student needs, students with disabilities, staff sense of efficacy and, you know, the training that they have in terms of like classified staff, sometimes in roles where they may not feel that they've been adequately trained. But so much is being driven, and then that theme of trauma came through. And so, Don, I probably shouldn't say this on the recording, but the word I really wanted to say is you need a behavior czar. But I was afraid there'd be too much negative connotation with that word. So I have Director of Research Policy and Practices for Student Behavior. So then I thought, surely there's a better word to use. So I actually fed it into an AI app to say, give me a title for somebody who does this stuff. It was worthless what they gave me. So then I fed back, what about, and I put this in, and I decided these AI apps are meant to make you feel good, because all they fed back were all the reasons that was a great title for that position. So take that for whatever it's worth, because surely there's some brain power in this room that can think of a better title for a position like that, because that sounds a little cumbersome. However, when you talked about the compliance piece, I quickly wrote down a note here that is also an appropriate part of that kind of role. What is critical is this person needs to have authority to be a decision maker without having to go through layers of approval. This person has to have access to data already being collected and the ability to collect different and more data. This person needs to be able to acquire information and knowledge on resources being used and not currently used. But it needs to be across attendance centers, because it starts to break down when it's attendance center specific. And so obviously, the superintendent's team will make recommendations on the how, and as a board, you have to prioritize. I very carefully did not put this as number one, but it is my number one thing that I think really would make a difference in terms from the comments and everything that we collected, people would know their voices were heard and that action was being taken. So that piece is in there. I have a number of other things I'm not gonna belabor here. We've talked about them. I've heard them mentioned tonight. I was writing things down as I heard them come up in the agenda. More data is needed, as I said, on the personal days. What I did not really illustrate tonight, but came through frequently in comments, was concerns about cell phone use and cell phone policies. An audit of security protocols, costs associated with class size. There may be an inverse effect with the ability to pay more and decrease class size or not. I'm just saying data must be collected to be able to make decisions on that. And we're talking about data-driven decision-making. But in closing, the point I really want to make is that not every recommendation can be implemented in the near future here. A number of them, if prioritized, could be made in the near future, but a number of them are also transformational, which means it takes years of work. And I'm probably repeating myself because I'm old and that's what you do when you're old. But the proverb of when's the best time to plant a tree? Yesterday. Okay, well, then today. And so on those things that take more time, you have to start at some point. And if they emerge as high priorities. Now, in terms of change theory, to have a good mix of recommendations of things where progress can be seen quickly as well as transformative would really help to make employee voices feel heard. So to find some things in which people will immediately see a result in conjunction with starting the hard work that takes multiple years to accomplish. I think another positive thing is if you go back to the context of the prior reports and things that are in the works now, there's clear alignment of what the needs are, and it shows some very clear direction in terms of the goals that have been set to address those kinds of needs. So that is what I have to present to you tonight. I'm happy to entertain questions.
Board members, questions for Dr. Wiesman? Dr. Bonebreak, was that a serious question? That wasn't a serious question.
Well,
We
I used to tell my husband when somebody would be elected like that it was our fault because we were the teachers of the people who voted to elect that person. So in essence, we bear the responsibility.
Well, the family was basically destroyed in the early 60s. And government has basically led to single parent families. And our education system was just community centers, but now we have to be parents as well. We didn't have these problems. I'm not going to say how many years ago, but before the 60s. And this is an exhaustive survey, but we need a lot more money than the legislature is willing to give us. Smaller classes, more paras, more mental health help. I appreciate the work that went into this, but I'm just frustrated and cynical about our ability with current fiscal limitations to accomplish what needs to be accomplished. Sorry for my cynicism.
That's quite all right. Anyone else?
This is just such great information. So thank you very much for compiling it and giving us some goals at the end to look at and prioritize. That's really helpful. I would ask our president that maybe there is a retreat of some time that we can prioritize and move forward with. If you could do something around finding a retreat date for us to work on this material together, along with our superintendent and whatever leadership people that she thinks should be there. I was wondering if you might be able to do that.
That sounds like a great idea. Anyone else? Ms. Stewart Campbell.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Wiesman. This is really, really useful. And I'm kind of obsessing right now about the title of this recommended position. And I have an idea. We could talk about it at the retreat. That's a great idea, to have a retreat to figure out these actionable results that we hopefully can have the funds for. Yes. So thank you.
Ms. Schmidt.
Thank you, Dr. Wiesman. I know it was a very nebulous idea when we kind of came to you with it, but it's great to see some data and something down in black and white that can help us to move forward. And then Dr. Bonebreak, to your response to you, it's an elephant, right? We got to eat it one bite at a time. So we just got to pick something, and it'll be a snowball going downhill, and it'll pick up momentum. In 10 years from now, we'll make a difference, the best that we can. So.
Mrs. Schmidt, I thought of the exact same proverb. So that's confirmation right there that we can do this. This is a task that is going to be challenging, but I think we've got the capacity, the skill set, the resources to be able to put this into motion. And the data, yeah, definitely. Thank you, Dr. Weisman, for being here, and for sharing the data with us. It feels like it's been a long time coming. It has in a lot of ways, but I think it was worth the effort and time and diligence it took to do it right. And so we look forward to continuing to work with you on this as we go forward.
Thank you all.
All right, so we are right at the end of our meeting, and it's time for board member comments. And I think I'll start and then pass it to Dr. Schumacher. I wasn't in town for finance committee meeting, so others will have to talk about that. So I was at policy council meeting last week. I think it was last week, this week. Oh my gosh. Okay. Doesn't feel like it. But there'll be some just some kind of cleanup changes with a few policies, but we also in policy council had Mrs. Wallace and Mr. Dick there to kind of talk about some changes with the graduation policy. So those are things that you guys will see coming that we'll be looking over at some point. I don't think we did it today, but as we go forward. So that was pretty much the focus of the policy council meeting. And I want to say, it looks like somebody's had a birthday down there. So happy birthday, Ms. Bawley. I also want to say to my colleagues, apparently I, as president, am supposed to take responsibility for recognizing people's birthdays when they come around. And I haven't done that, so I apologize for that. None of you said anything to me about it, so thank you for the grace. Okay. So thank you. I will be much more intentional about that. So Dr. Schumacher.
My birthday is in about 2 months, Mr. Tatum, so.
Thanks for the lead time.
I don't really have much. We met in personnel just prior to the meeting and welcomed Mrs. Williams leading that meeting, which was great. And, continuing to work on some of the changes that have been put into motion that we've talked about the last couple meetings. So I think we continue to be excited to move forward and act on some of the topics that have come up over the last month or so. And I think that's all I have for tonight.
Right. Mr. Munoz.
Yeah, I was in the same policy committee meeting with Mr. Tatum, and yeah, we talked about some changes to some classes and whatnot. We'll see that on the agenda for your review next meeting or coming up here shortly. And then obviously we'll have that vote afterwards. That's really it for me. I hope everybody had a restful spring break, and that we're back at it, supporting our kids, making sure they're successful, given I think some tests that are coming up for them. So best of luck, everyone.
Okay. Mrs. Bawley. Go ahead, Mrs. Bawley. We'll jump to Mrs. Schmidt after you're done.
So at our financial committee meeting, we did receive our legal max general fund recently. And let's see, we went through our needs assessment for every single building to see what each building would need for the needs in their building. And that needs assessment was built by their building leadership and along with the leadership here, so that we understand what each building needs to move their students forward. And June is our final LOB for the year. So we're really hoping for some students to come to us in the open borders. That will be very helpful. I also wanted to say I'm buttoned up because I was at the State House all day long. KSB had an advocacy day. I had several things to tell you, but the one I really want to talk to you about is our school financing, and our special ed bill is wrapped around with very bad legislation. And so KSB and other education people cannot back this bill. So I don't know what's going to happen right now with our school financing, but right now it's in a House bill that's really a tornado all around those two. So they're obviously trying to stall or stop the financing. And so I don't know what's going to happen with it, but call your legislators and say that that House bill is not good for education or our students, and that they need to go back to the drawing board to get a good school finance and special ed. Thank you. Oh, Ms. Stewart Campbell has a report from her committee with Sheldon Head Start. Sheldon is currently under a class review similar to the federal review. Since COVID, programs like us that have the technology capacity are doing this review with video recordings. 12 of our 13 classrooms were selected, and Ms. Tanner, Ms. Neufeld, and Ms. Herman are recording in these classrooms. These observations are an hour long and look at the classroom environment, teachers and children interaction, emotional and instructional supports. This review period is from March 6th through April 29th. And we look forward to once again highlighting our wonderful program at Sheldon Head Start.
All right, thank you. Mr. Schmidt.
I got nothing. It's late. We need to go.
Dr. Bonebreak.
Health Committee met, and persisting, our expenses are greater than the premiums. But we've got the same rate for the next year, but who has the biggest and tallest and newest buildings across the country? Wellness met, and we're having that exercise park built, and we're planning on monthly exercise programs, but there's 7 stations lasting 7 minutes each. You can do some on your own, just with a QR code. And probably most importantly, I went with Ms. Sharp and Dr. Anderson to Scott Dual Language, and that's an exciting school. We went in and children are raising their hands to answer questions before the teacher asked them. The culture is phenomenal there, and I think that would also be a good place to do our extended school year. Okay.
All right. Thank you all. And with that, need a motion to adjourn.
I'm not gonna no, I'm just I move the meeting adjourned.
Do we have a second? Mrs. Bowley seconds. All right. Show of hands.